is the biggest fail date you have ever had? Story 1. Met a girl online, on about 10 years ago. We exchange pics, everything is looking good, we get to talking about various nonsense online, and she asserts that she can beat anyone at Scrabble. I knew I was being baited for a date, so I challenge her to a game and she invites me over to her place. I get there and she's a good 100 pounds heavier than she was in her picture. Also, her house, as she had called it, is not a house. It is a trailer in a trailer park. She has no table on which to play Scrabble, so we play on the floor. She has no drinks to offer me other than a bottle of Sam's Club bottled water. I obliterated her at Scrabble twice. She begged me to stay and have with her. I did not. I had my first date ever in 9th grade, all planned out with a girl I really liked. When I was running through the plan with my friends, they reminded me how socially awkward I was and that if I couldn't carry the conversation throughout the date, there wouldn't be a second one. So me being the smooth guy that I am, I decide to prepare by Googling how to talk to a girl and conversation starters an hour or so before the date. But I was too nervous to memorize the questions, so I wrote them down on my palm for future reference. We went to a sushi place at her suggestion. Of course I say I love sushi to convince her I am a sophisticated and worldly gentleman, but I never had the stuff before. Turns out the green substance they put on the side of the sushi roll is not, in fact, guacamole. It is wasabi sauce, which I can only describe as a combination of horseradish, fire, and so I ate the whole chunk of it, and there I am, practically sobbing and oozing mucus out of my nose when I decide to distract her with a tactical conversation starter. Only problem is, my palms were too sweaty and all the ink had bled. I didn't notice while I was wiping the wasabi-induced snot storm off my face, so now my face was covered in bled ink and snot while she stared blankly at me, wondering what to do. I saw myself in the reflection of window and I was in so much pain and so mortified that I just started crying. We ended up having to call my mom to pick us up early. Shut up. I was in 9th grade and drove home in silence except for the oldie station my mom had playing on the radio. My mom let me use her sweater to wipe my face off. We ended up being friends later on in high school and laugh about it now. To this day, she thinks I was only crying from wasabi. TLDR, ate a whole bunch of wasabi thinking it was guacamole. Face covered in ink, snot and tears of shame. Friend-zoned, no number for Jakucha. Story 2. I went out with a guy who wore the puffy shirt from Seinfeld. I swear this was the same shirt. I looked beyond that, or at least tried to, and continued with the date. He later had a meltdown in his car because I said hello to a male friend we had seen while we were at a coffee shop and laughed when he told a story to me. He said my laugh was towards him and that he shouldn't have fallen for me so quickly and wouldn't have if he'd known I'd cheat on him so fast. He was crying really hard the whole way back to my house. It was the most awkward car ride home ever. We never talked again. Story 3. My good friend, Vicky, and her husband Will, a surgeon, are always trying to set me up. Always. I usually turn down their offers. But they talked up this guy Ben. He seemed like a great guy, smart, a doctor, and his TMNT collection was bigger than mine. He took me to a pretty nice place for dinner, and it was kinda nervous but nothing like bad, and then he spilled his drink on purpose. I saw it, so I was like what, and then he started talking like a baby. Oopsie. I spilled I'd wink, I'm a bwad boy. And I was like, Ben, are you okay? And he kept at it, baby talk, looking all coy. And then I am not making this up, asked if mommy wanted to spank her bad boy. I was out of there. I just got up from the table and walked out. He ran after, talking normally, apologizing. I had to wait for my coat at coat check. I accepted his apology, assured him I wouldn't tell Vicky and Will about his kink, and then he went to hug me, and it lasted a little too long. I pushed him away and well, there's no polite way of saying it, he jizzed in his pants. I have no proof, but yeah, he did against my leg. I ran away, so yeah, worst date ever, huh? Story 4. I went on a date with a Redditor. We met up, got dinner, saw a movie, and went back to my place to just hang out and chat. Long story short, he got on my computer, got on Reddit, and 1 awkward hour later, I drove him home. Y'all, if you aren't impressed with a date, just let them know. Don't Reddit at their house awkwardly and act really weird. No bueno. Story 5. TLDR. Got set up on an awful blind date with someone who couldn't have been a bigger case of false advertising and a worse match. Got the waitress as a girlfriend instead. I am 25-year-old male. I let a friend set me up on a blind date. She told me this girl was a reasonably attractive brunette who was witty and funny and very honest and outgoing. I don't like blind dates, but this friend loves to matchmake and was sure we would be the best couple ever. Fast forward to date day. I am showed a picture of this girl for last reassurances and she looks alright. I am pretty optimistic. I phone her and we agree to meet at a Buffalo Wild Wings for a few drinks and some food on a Thursday night. All good signs of things I can get behind. I agree to meet her at 8 p.m. I arrive about 7:50 and text her I have arrived and I grab a table since it's busy. She responds that she is on the way. 8 p.m. She's not on time. 8:15. Still nothing. I order a beer. 825. Still nothing. This waitress is flirty and fun though. I order an appetizer. 835. Still nothing, so I start eating the appetizer. Beer 2 arrives. 845. She still hasn't showed up. No call and no text from her, and it looks like I'm going to be stood up. I should have left 30 minutes before, but I wanted to not be a stuck-up and give up on a good friend of one of my best gal pals. Finally 8:50 comes and the girl arrives and holy cow was I in for a surprise. This photo of an athletically built brunette weighing about 120 and standing 56 couldn't be any more radically wrong. I'm guessing the photo I was shown was her at like 18 or 19, or a senior picture from high school. Before me is a mildly ridiculous oaf of a woman. Fiery red, curly hair with obviously brunette roots and about 100 pounds over her photo, comes over to the table and introduced herself, and she says she is sorry she is late and nothing else. We proceed to have the most awkward 45-minute BWW experience I've ever had. She had terrible body language, awful eye contact. Oh, and she was witty and funny, alright, in that way that people say haha I am so funny. Aren't I quirky and adorable? Yeah, she was one of those, annoying as, vapid as, about as deep as a toothpaste cap. She pretended her honesty was intelligence, and it definitely wasn't. I'd never been more turned off, so after 45 minutes, we finished out dinner and packed up and went our separate ways. But that lovely waitress came back over and expressed she was happy that I didn't get stood up, and I let her know a good friend set me up, and I told her I would have left if she hadn't been there to keep me company. Got her digits, she's still my girlfriend. Story 6. Oh boy, well, I was about 18 and working in the city New York at my father's printing shop. I had met this guy a few days before on a bus going upstate to visit my friend. I tell my father I'm leaving early to go hang out in the city with a friend and I'm just gonna take the train home from there. I meet up with the guy, and almost immediately he's weird. Think Pepe Le Pew, like he's trying to get all touchy-feely and huggy-squeezy on the subway. Then he pulls out a disposable camera and asks if he can take my picture and tell people I'm his girlfriend. I of course say no, but I was a big people pleaser and didn't want to hurt his feelings, so I didn't end the date. But I couldn't wait to get away. This continued until we were walking down some random street and some lumpy waddles up to me and starts getting in my face. It was his girlfriend. We're in Midtown Manhattan, and we just happened to pass her by hanging out with friends. I tell her to get the out of my face because I had no idea he had a girlfriend and am actually relieved she decided to show up. He starts to follow me and I just turn around and say, dude, you really don't want to do that. Trust me, since my train wasn't for a while, I decide to go back to the office to wait. When I got there I found my father cheating on my mother with the woman he hired to help with the filing. Story 7. I was at a party once, and got approached by a girl. She wanted to set up a double date with me and my buddy, and her friend. My friend and I accepted his date was kinda ugly, but he agreed to take one for the team. The day of the date, the ugly friend cancelled on him, which was probably because it was just a setup for me and girl A in the first place. Okay, sure, we go on, so we set up a movie, and go see it. After the movie, she wanted to go back to her dorm apartment complex and hang out with her pals. The date was going okay, so I agreed. It wasn't odd college age, I was 20 or so, I think she was 22, so we hang with her roomies for a while. Things are okay, then they want to go out, so they leave. I offer to leave like a normal gentleman, and she indicates I should stay for a little. I agree. We put on another movie, and I make a move to kiss her, and we kiss for a minute or so, then suddenly, she pulls away without warning and immediately gets really agitated. She wants to know where things are going, and before I can answer she begins crying very, very hard. She goes off on a tangent for about an hour about all these very odd issues she's having and how nothing is right and all men are going to abuse her WTF, and so on. Now within the first minute of the freakout I'm thinking, okay, this is over, let's find an exit strategy. This girl is obviously not ready for anything. But this was a mistake because I start asking questions, out of morbid curiosity. As it turns out, I'm like the second person she's ever kissed, and how she's a virgin, because her mother was super overbearing and never let her date, and told her all men were going to kill, rape her and leave her in a dumpster. She thinks cause I kissed her that we have to have now, but first she wants to call my parents and make sure I'm not an axe murderer. Can she do a background check on me and see my grades? Oh now wait, it's back to the subject, and she says wants to but she's afraid and doesn't know what to do, and so at this point I stop her. I tell her that I've had a few girlfriends in my time, and that she's better off finding someone a little less experienced. Since she's not, I tell her I'm not interested in right now, nor a relationship. Well, I totally was on both parts, but not with crazy people. I tell her the connection between us was good, it's just not right for us to sleep together. She cries really hard again, but agrees that it's not the right time, not the right person, etc. I go home, chalk it up to a bad night. Now mind you, all this girl had was my name and telephone number. I think she had the telephone number of my friend. The next morning, at 7:00 a.m. or so, I get a knock on my door. I don't live on campus, I live way away off campus with roommates. It's her. Now I'm freaking, cause how did she find my house? She's got flowers, with a card. She's still crying, and she apologizes for her behavior the night before, and wants me to wait to read the card until after she leaves. I agree, and she tearfully walks away. I go inside. The card says, I'm paraphrasing, of course I really like you, I know I probably scared you away, but if you ever want to give it a shot, give me a call. Right about the time I think, well maybe someday, an intensely loud pounding starts on the front door. I answer, it's her, she's screaming and in tears. I ask why, and she's livid at me for not reading the note and chasing after her. Now I'm thinking WTFX 10 to the millionth exponent, but I calmly explain I need some time to think about it, especially since she just started trying to break down my door. She falls on the floor crying. I attempt to console her, and she flails at me and cries harder. I wait for like 10 minutes for her to stop crying, and she agrees to give me some time. She walks away again. It's not 30 seconds before the pounding on the front door starts again. This time I'm done. I'm not going to answer. I explain what's happening to the roommates, and they don't answer either. She spends the next hour screaming threats at the front door, crying and pounding on the door. I was just about to call the police before she left. The next morning, she repeated the whole thing with a bigger bouquet and slightly less screaming, more pitiful crying, but it lasted only about 15 minutes. 'cause I threatened to call the police through the door and she called me a limp and ran away. I saw her only once more about 5 years after, and after a friendly hi, she told me that she was really glad we hadn't dated, because she had a new boyfriend now, and that I was probably never going to change my mind. The guy was there with her, and he'll admit she was a hottie, but the guy looked like Quasimodo. Edit spelling, and a TLDR, as Sarah 582 said, Karma Suitor 3 startled a witch. Story 8. Things were going good, I mean real good. The city was celebrating its glorious playoff victory. The local heroes were one win closer to winning the Stanley Cup. Women were, shall I say, juiced about the victory. Liquor was fueling the celebration and breaking down inhibition barriers. Enter me, enter her, me so, pretty fun night, Her yeah, too bad the bar is closing soon. Me yeah, her I have my friend's place to myself tonight. Wanna come over? Me wait, what, 30 minutes later, kiss kiss hug hug, heard you have a condom, me no, her there is a store up the road, here are my keys by now, XXX me okay, 30 minutes later, where did she live again? Story 9. A few years ago I met a guy at a bar who was born on exactly the same day as me. That seemed like reason enough to accept his offer when he asked me out. He told me to dress up very nicely as we would be attending an art gallery opening. I got all dolled up and when he came to pick me up, he was in a t-shirt and jeans. Okay, maybe ID misunderstood the attire requirement. We got there and it was in a warehouse out in the middle of nowhere. It was actually an art gallery, but barely. Some of his friends were there, but he wouldn't introduce me to them and proceeded to chat with them and ignore me the entire evening. Meanwhile, I'm dressed to the nines and they're also all in jeans. After we left, he asked if he could take me out to dinner. I figured whatever, at least I'd get a free meal out of this awful evening. We hit up a nice pizza joint and ordered a pizza. As I reached for a second slice, he just looks at me and says, wow, a second slice, really geez, you're a house. So I ate the rest of the pizza. Story 10. Not as mortifying as some I've read, but by far my worst date. It was a first date with a guy I met online. We'd had some nice conversations and decided to meet up one night for sushi. The night started off well enough, and I was really enjoying myself. About a half hour into the date, he starts getting a crap ton of texts and calls from who he claims is his dad. Being the slightly naive girl I was 4 years ago, I shrugged it off. But the texts kept coming. He never bothered to put his phone on silent and checked every single text. He said his dad wanted to go work out with him. At that point, I had a good handle on what was going on. Look, I told him if you aren't into me, that's fine, but have the guts to tell me instead of relying on your buddy to bail you out. Actually, he replied while standing, it's a booty call, thanks for dinner, and he left. I sat there for a little bit, embarrassed as because of all the sympathetic glances from the other patrons. The server brought the check over, but she leaned down to me and whispered, I heard what happened. I took that order off so you only are paying for what you ate. That's when I started crying in the middle of the restaurant. I left the server a massive tip for her generosity and spent the rest of the night drowning my sorrows in wine, Ben and Jerry's, and love actually. Story 11. Not entirely a fail, but something out of the ordinary, especially in our age. I met this girl at college. She was one beautiful girl, and I even joined a choir to get to know her better. I felt good chemistry between us, and even our mutual friends noticed the reaction between us. Eventually, I built up the courage to ask this girl out on a date. Things seemed to be going fine until the end of the date. She told me she was planning on becoming a nun. TLDR, I got blocked by God. Story 12. Last year I decided to text a cute girl that I had class with the previous term to try to set up a date. And she responded with something like, sure, I was hoping I'd hear from you again. She said she's a good bowler, so we agreed on bowling, and the day of the date rolled around the next week. She was sitting on the railing outside the bowling alley waiting. Then when I got out of the car and smiled at her, she said, oh hey, I wasn't expecting to see you here. I thought something might be up, but I couldn't think of a good response, so I acted like I wasn't expecting to see her either. I asked her if I should go inside and get a lane set up for us and she said, yeah sure, just hold on a bit. I asked another friend to meet me here. When I asked who it was, she told me that it was her friend that just so happened to have the same first name as me. I went inside and handed over some passes for free games, put on my shoes, then put our 3 names in the machine. I didn't want to just start without her, so after waiting for 10 minutes or so, I got a text from her saying, where are you? I really don't want to be stuck here with this guy I used to have class with. So I found out that my instincts were right, but as a bowler with free bowling passes that were about to expire, I wasn't about to just leave. I responded, sorry, family emergency, I can't make it, and a minute later she came back inside and found me at whatever lane I was on. When I asked her about her friend, she told me that he wasn't coming. When I asked her if she was ready to start, she then told me, you'll just watch, I don't really like to bowl, I only really came to watch my other friend. Supposedly he's a really good bowler. After that I told her, well if you're not going to bowl there's not much of a point in staying, I was just going to practice for a match anyway. We said our goodbyes, and I never heard from her again. TLDR set up a date with a girl I had class with the previous term. She mistook me for a different guy she liked with the same first name in her cell contacts list. Then she spent half the date waiting outside for this other guy while texting me saying, where are you? I really don't want to be stuck here with this guy I used to have class with. Story 13. It's a fairly long story but basically on date number 2, I went number 2 in my pants in her car, edit full story so it was date number 2 and she insisted that she wanted to drive this time. I had no problem with that and we decided to do the whole dinner and a movie thing. She picked me up at 5 and we headed to Cheeseburger in Paradise. We ate, had a couple of beers, and headed out. We had over an hour before the movie started, so we decided to head out to a little city park that was about a mile from the theater. It was a nice day, birds singing, not too hot, gentle breeze. Little did I know how hard the coming crash would be, so we're walking this short loop through the park, making small talk, nothing too interesting, when I become acutely aware of that feeling, you know, the one that makes your lower gut feel like it's about to mimic Vesuvius, that, or an angry badger has been camping in your gut and now wants out. Right now, I didn't say anything, just let her keep talking while I feverishly looked for a public restroom where I could decimate a stall, no dice. At this point the urge had settled a bit. I figured the best course of action was to beeline back to her car and go to the theater, where there was sure to be many public restrooms. So we headed back to her car. I should mention at this point that this date was particularly timid, very sweet-natured, but timid to a fault, like she moved slowly and mousily is that even a word, and even drove 5 miles per hour under the speed limit. Just as we pull out of the park, the urge comes back, this time it's not around. We make it about 3/4 of a mile when we stop at a red light that had just gone from yellow to red and now we wait, and wait, and wait, my vision tunneled and all I could think is fuck you traffic light, you, after what seemed like an eternity the light changed to green. Mousy date then proceeds to move at 5 miles per hour maximum speed to get to the movie theater parking lot. Then, as if Thor himself brought his hammer down on my colon, there was no holding back, as I white-knuckled her passenger door, the gates of my let loose with a substance that can only be described as borderline inhuman. I can only describe the subsequent few minutes as a blur, because I hauled my soak to the theater's bathroom as fast as I could. It didn't really matter though, what was done was done. Witnessed by any number of the bystanders waiting to buy tickets, I wasn't sure who to feel worse for though, myself, or them for being exposed to it. While I was in the restroom, I texted her just go home. Amazingly, she wanted to stay. I said no, seriously, go home. In the days and weeks that followed, the date actually claimed she didn't care at all about the fact that I disgraced her car. She wanted to keep dating. Somehow, I wasn't comfortable dating a girl who was cool with the fact that I took an enormous in her car. Later, I was diagnosed by a gastroenterologist with IBS. The event actually created some lasting social anxiety until one day I realized that was a waste of time and it's a lot more fun to laugh about it, so I do. I mean, I've already in a date's car, what's the worst I could do? The summer after graduating from high school I went on a date with a girl I had been friends with for a while. We decided to go to a fair a few towns over, we walk around, eat some fried foods, go on a ride or two. Things were going great and many laughs were had. We then went on a ride similar to a zipper salt and pepper shaker, lots of spinning upside down and so on. About halfway through the ride the funnel cake I had earlier decided that it did not want to remain in my stomach. With her sitting next to me I commenced throwing up, and then we flip upside down, and my comes right back at my face. I had enough sense to keep most of it away from her, as she emerged from the ride puke-free. I did not. We have now been dating for over 6 years, are currently engaged and will be married next summer. Story 14. I went on a date with a girl, crashed at her house after no hanky-panky, and was woken up by her irate Hispanic boyfriend at about 7:00 a.m. the next morning. Story 15. Internet date horror story. So I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship and was being encouraged to get back into the game and not sit around sulking, so I decided to join OkCupid. I decided to message a few girls my first night, and then I largely ignored it for a few weeks until one night I get a response. I checked the girl's pictures out, and I thought it a little odd she only had pictures of her face from an angle that sort of ignored the rest of her, but we started talking, and before long I actually did enjoy speaking with her. Then one night out of the blue she proclaims we must meet right now to figure this out, because I think I love you. So I agreed to meet her at Starbucks. I'm waiting there and this incredibly large girl shows up and introduces herself. All the while I'm trying to remain calm and collected. We buy a drink and start talking, and she was pretty interesting, except every 2 seconds she asked me, so do you like the way I look, can you see this happening? The date continued into dinner when she ordered more food than I could ever consume in one sitting, and I'm not a small guy, and she proceeded to eat it all while talking to me and continually asking me if I liked what I saw. I paid for dinner and was going to politely tell her it just wasn't going to work when she tried to ambush make out with me in the parking lot. It was then and only then that I gained the speed of Neo from the Matrix and hugged her while at the same time avoiding the kiss. She asked me one final time if I liked what I saw, and my response was I wouldn't have minded it so much if you hadn't taken a magnifying glass to your insecurities. She then in an act of pure defiance pulled out some sort of candy bar from her purse and said I'm happy with how I look, and you would have gotten lucky tonight. And you know what, all the power to her, just don't ask me if I like you every 2 seconds. Story 16. This happened to me a long time ago. My best friend was dating the fairly wealthy girl. I asked her to hook me up with a friend. I was hoping to get a rich girlfriend, too. I was in the Marine Corps at the time and made about $800 a month before taxes. So, I was set up on this blind date. I picked her up at her condo on Newport Beach. The entire condo was owned by her dad. He also owned some exotic auto dealership on PCH. I don't think it's there anymore. She was quite attractive and I thought I had hit a home run. She got in my car and we headed towards dinner. Then she spoke. She said the only thing men were good for was to be a donor. Men were all idiots and wouldn't get anywhere without a woman to tell them what to do. She said her future husband will need to worship the ground she walked on and do everything she said without question. This prattled on for about 15 minutes, about halfway between her place and the restaurant. I knew I didn't want to spend $80 on dinner and drinks with this psycho, So, I pulled over into a parking lot, reached across her lap and opened her car door. I looked at her and told her to get the out. This was in the mid-late 80s. Long before cell phones. I drove off and never heard from her again. My friend's girlfriend had a few words to say to me though. After I told her what Psycho had said, she understood. Story 17. Once, I met a girl online. She mentioned via texting that she was wanting to pursue a master's degree in biomedical anthropology. I thought, sweet, a girl with a brain, and I like talking about cultural anthropology. Naturally, time came for us to talk on the phone. She insisted, however, she didn't talk. I asked her about her degree. Shouldn't talk about it even remotely coherently. I couldn't tell if she was lying about her academic pursuits or just genuinely boring. I told her that I didn't think our conversation was going on anywhere. She defensively insisted that she was a fascinating and interesting person. Who says that anyway? I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. We decided to meet. Over dinner she barely talked. She barely looked at me. Conversation was like pulling the teeth from a rabid honey badger with periodontitis and heat. After dinner, we get back to my place and am ready to call it a night. Sure, she's kinda cute, but at this point I'd rather go read about Tibetan fraternal polyandry than try to talk to this girl anymore. Opting for honesty, I flatly told her that I didn't think it was going to work out. Thanks for letting me take you to dinner, blah blah etc. She raged. She raised her voice at me and exclaimed how you could not think that I'm interesting. I'm the most interesting person I know. Look at me. I just stood there and blinked. That might have been the longest sequence of sentences that she'd ever run together. I replied, I'm sorry, I'm just not seeing it. Wanna watch Total Recall? Being a Philip K. fan, she replied, sure. So we watched the movie, then we screwed. At least she made sounds then. Then I never called her again. True facts. I moved back from another state to finish college when I was 25. The first night back in my college town I met a girl at a friend's house and we hit it off. In fact, that night we shared a sleeping bag we didn't have. I asked her if she wanted to go on a date before we passed out and she said sure. So a few days later I called her and asked if she'd like to go bowling and get a few drinks. She said that it sounded like fun. I show up to the bowling alley the next day and I see her there, along with about 10 mutual friends. I thought, hey, whatever, if she feels more comfortable with some friend around. No big deal. In fact, a few of the friends made fun of what I planned on being a date. We all bowled then went to the same house that we met a week prior. While sitting around outside after a few beers I thought I wonder where Sheena is. Upon walking through the house and looking out the front door I see Sheena is riding on my good friend's back as they walk towards his house. I just said, Sheena, what the? She jumped off his back, ran up to me and drunkenly said sorry, I'm leaving. Then proceeded to run back up to my good friend and ride us back to his house where they hooked up and proceeded to date for over 2 years. The worst part was that I hated her for that and still had to put up with her. Oh, and she thought I was in love with her and told every girl that I knew that I couldn't get over her. I hated that. Edit. Thanks for all the attention. I'm surprised by how serious some people took this. I thought it was just a funny story, so thanks for the laughs. Story 18. I met a girl online. She seemed reasonably attractive and fairly easygoing, so I figured, hey, why not? We met at a local coffee shop and chatted for a few minutes before a mutual acquaintance of ours happened to show up out of nowhere and begin talking to the two of us. Turns out, they were both in AA together, and I then proceeded to learn her long and sordid history of alcohol abuse, and the real reason for her wanting to date. Her exact words were, I'm trying to replace my boyfriend who died this summer. So the guy decides to invite himself along for our date, neither of them asking me if it was cool for him to do so. We end up driving to a bar, a fine thing for a couple of recovering alcoholics to do, and the entire time they're playing the absolute most god-awful music on the radio I can think of. I'm in the back seat, this horrible is blaring over the speakers while the two of them are chatting, and I'm thinking to myself, dear God, how can I find a way to get out of this? So we get to the bar and they proceeded to drink coffee and play air hockey while I tried to think of a way to leave. I ended up faking a cell phone call from my friend, saying I needed to go because she was in the hospital. The girl then proceeds to freak out at me for bailing on her during our date, at which point I just stared blankly at her for a second, blinked, and walked away. Story 19. About 5 or 6 years ago I met a girl that came into my work. I talked to her for a little bit. We seemed to really hit it off. She asked me if I wanted to go get dinner sometime. She said she'd come pick me up and everything. That weekend we go out together to a restaurant on the other side of town. She was very interesting to me. I really didn't tell her a lot about myself because I kept asking her questions about what the various things she was talking about. We'd just finished eating. I told her that I was going to get our meal since she drove us there. I had just given the waiter my debit card when I blacked out. This has happened 2 other times in my life, so it's not common. After my seizure was over, everyone in this restaurant was around me. People were holding my legs and arms. Everyone was scared and someone had called an ambulance. I call it my down feeling. It's the mood I'm in after I have a seizure. Everything seems different and it's kind of hard to explain. In this state of mind I get up to my feet. I looked all over the restaurant for her and she had already left. I thought she went to get help. I made the EMS people wait for her as long as I could. I tried calling her. I didn't get out of the hospital until 1 a.m. I had to walk 7 miles home because we don't have public transportation in this town. I never heard from her again after that.